Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Today we have Mr. Eddie Guilmette, the founder and CEO of Midori no Ki, a hospitality and management business in Niseko. Now I would like to pass it over to Mr. Guilmette for our seminar today.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Kobayashi-san, for having me today. I'd like to wait. Do we need to wait until 10 o'clock before starting, or are we good to go?
We should be able to get to go. Okay,
great. Well, my name is Eddie Guilmette. I'm the CEO of Midori no Ki, also known as M&K Niseko. I'm really happy to talk to you and share my story. My hope is that you can gain some knowledge today that will help you as you start your careers. So with that, let's go to our agenda. Here we go. So I'm going to start a little bit with my background, discuss my career on Wall Street in banking before starting M&K Niseko. I want to spend some time on my experience with starting a new company and being an entrepreneur, because I think that could be helpful. I want to go into some detail about the hospitality industry, at least our section of it. And then to wrap up, I'll highlight some of the lessons I've learned throughout my work and life experiences, and hopefully that will be useful to you all. So, my background. I went to public schools from kindergarten through high school in a suburban town called Middletown, Connecticut, USA. I played team sports, baseball, basketball, football from a young age. When I was young, more than anything, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Unfortunately, I wasn't nearly good enough. My favorite player was Pete Rose, who was famous for diving and getting his uniform dirty. And I have to say his style definitely influenced me. Both my parents were hard workers and they taught me a lot. I have 3 siblings, so we had a crowded house, and my parents encouraged all of us to get a job at an early age and earn some money. So my first work experiences, I was delivering newspapers when I was 10. And then I started working in restaurants after school and on the weekends when I was in high school. So I guess you could say I was exposed to the hospitality industry at a pretty early age. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in high school, other than playing professional baseball. But one event did influence me. In our economics class, we played a stock market game. And it worked like this. You did research on companies, you picked the ones you liked, you allocated money to those companies at their current stock price. At the end of the semester, the person whose portfolio had the highest value, they won. I didn't win, but I thought it was interesting, and the competition kind of reminded me of sports. From there, my advisor in high school, he encouraged me to look at universities that focused on business and finance. I was fortunate enough to be accepted to Bentley University in Massachusetts, where I ended up majoring in finance. The nice thing about Bentley is they had good relationships with companies in Boston, and they encouraged students to take internships to earn work experience. And I had some interesting internships. I spent 1 semester break working for a stockbroker, which is cool, making cold calls, which was not so cool. Cold call is a process of looking at a telephone book, dialing a number, reading a speech, and asking them if they'd like to speak to your boss. It did not go well. Just about everyone hung up on me, and they shared some choice words before hanging up. But I also got a chance to work at Sikorsky helicopter during the school break, and I got to see them making and testing helicopters, which was very cool. My friends and I worked as painters one summer during university, and that was super hard work, working in the heat on ladders and dodging bumblebees. I also worked in a few restaurants, again, waiting tables. But probably the most interesting job, and the one, again, that kind of put me on the path of finance, was I was working at night from midnight to 8 a.m. at a company called Interactive Data. We printed stock market graphs, we packed them up, and we sent them to companies in Boston. And I thought that was an interesting career. And my final internship was the summer of my junior year when I was accepted as an intern at State Street Bank. So my early years in banking, I was with State Street and in an internship, and they lost a member of their team, and they asked me to stay on full time. So that autumn, instead of going back to school, college during the day, I finished up my last semester at night and on the weekends. And I just didn't appreciate at the time why State Street wanted to keep me. But what I did know was I knew how to use a computer and a spreadsheet. Now, this is in 1990. And at that time, our work in the bank was mostly done on large mainframe terminals and calculators. People didn't use PCs at work. Spreadsheets made life much easier because you could analyze information quickly, you could use scenarios, you could visualize data with graphs that didn't take hours to produce. I left State Street briefly for a private investment bank called Brown Brothers Harriman, which was a great experience. But then I ended up going back to State Street. And a couple of years later, they gave me the opportunity to study for my master's in business administration, or an MBA. But the strings attached were I had to work during the day. So I took my MBA at night and on the weekends. But once I finished my MBA, State Street offered me a 6-month international posting in Sydney, Australia in 1997. It turned out to be a great decision, and I've not lived in the United States since then. So as part of the role with State Street in Sydney, I traveled throughout Asia. I got to visit all the great cities: Hong Kong, Singapore, Beijing, Taipei, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Seoul. It also happened to be during the Asian financial crisis, so there was a lot of attention on Asia back at headquarters. And that gave me a lot of work, but more importantly, it gave me exposure to senior management who wanted information and analysis. From there, I took a calculated risk in the year 2000 to join my customer at the time, which was Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong. Morgan Stanley, as some of you may know, is one of the oldest and most prestigious banks on Wall Street. It was only a risk because I wasn't sure if I belonged. I'm being honest, most of the people at Morgan Stanley went to the best schools and they were the top in their industry. But thankfully, what I found is once you're part of their team, the people that matter in the company, they don't care about your background. They care about what you accomplish and how you do it. Now, my role at the time was focused on sales and relationship management with hedge funds and investment management companies. And to be honest, again, I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time as the financial services industry in Asia was growing very fast. In 2006, a number of my Morgan Stanley colleagues in the US and Europe joined Merrill Lynch, and I came along with them. This was my first opportunity to manage a large group of people. I was co-head of a business that had over 200 people scattered from Australia to India to Japan. There was a lot to learn, a lot of travel, but I loved the experience. And then something happened. In September of 2008, the great financial crisis struck when Lehman Brothers went out of business. And my company, Merrill Lynch, was sold to the Bank of America before it went out of business. But prior to that incident, I had a firsthand look at the problem that caused the financial crisis. And it was leverage, which is borrowing money using financial assets. We had a client in Australia that went out of business in 2007 because of too much leverage, and we all should have saw what was coming, but we didn't. But if you want to learn more about this, I suggest watching the movie The Big Short, which is a highly accurate and very funny movie about the great financial crisis of that time. So after the merger, I was sent to London with Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and I had a most unpleasant task of reducing headcount, which is also known as firing people. I didn't enjoy it, and I finally decided to retire from banking in 2012. Looking back, leaving finance was the best decision I ever made because it allowed me to have a better balance between work and family. But starting a new company is not easy. And what I learned over time is that, successful startups, new companies solve problems in some way. And what's challenging is you not only have to solve a business problem, but when you work for a startup or a new company, you have to do everything else: marketing, sales, operations, accounting, human resources, legal, all within a small team. When you work for a large company, generally you focus on one business area, particularly when you're new or you're young in your career. For example, you might be in the marketing department, but you're only responsible for, say, graphic design, while someone else writes the words for an advertisement and then someone else monitors results. In a small company, there is nowhere to hide. You're fully accountable, which, it's incredibly rewarding when your team does well, and it can be, incredibly disappointing when it doesn't work. What I really love about being an entrepreneur is you have a lot of control over the quality of service, the product design, and your company culture. You can make a difference directly and immediately. And this is different because when you work in a large company, change takes longer and your contribution, it's much harder to identify. So before my wife and I started M&K Niseko, and a big shout out to my wife who started our company, we'd been doing our homework. We started visiting Niseko in 2001 with a group of friends, just going snowboarding and skiing, and we fell in love with the place. The conditions, the powder skiing was amazing. Food was great, but the accommodation, not so good. It was uncomfortable. We kept coming back each year, and we finally bought a property in Niseko in 2005. But it was an apartment. It was small, and we soon realized it was not going to work for our growing family. So we started discussing the idea of building a holiday home with some friends and business partners. We looked around for help, but in the end, we decided to start M&K because there was no real estate company in Niseko building homes within a managed community. There were companies building standalone homes, but we wanted to be near other families, and we wanted to have hospitality on site. So we started investing in Country Resort in 2007, and today we've built over 60 homes with a concierge, restaurant, and playground on site. We started slowly. We managed our cash flows carefully, and we had to deal with Fukushima and many other challenges in those early years. And staying in business was hard, because it's uncertain. We weren't making a lot of money, but we stuck with it. And being resilient is an important part of running your own company. So as we've grown, M&K Niseko now has 4 pillars to our business. And our first one is real estate. In that business, we buy raw land, we put in roads, then we help owners build homes. We also buy and sell real estate, and we do construction project management, interior design, and even home renovations. But once you've sold a property, the owner typically needs someone to manage it. Property management is a service where we basically manage the finances of a property for an overseas owner. We also physically check the property as we do landscaping, snow clearing, and then we help the owners when they stay in their property. And we currently operate 3 resorts: Country Resort, The Orchards, and Akazora. Now, most of these owners, they rent their property to earn income, and they use M&K for marketing, sales, pricing, and providing hospitality services to the guests when they arrive in the resorts. Once the guests arrive in the resorts, we provide services in-house on our own. We have a restaurant called Tomo, we have the Adventure Kids Camp, and we have a ski school called Elevate. The 4 pillars of our business support each other. We've entered into these businesses over the last 10 years to meet the demand of our customers. And when it's all working well, a customer will come and stay with us, then they want to buy a property, and then the circle of services starts over again. So I mentioned earlier, one of the nice things about starting and running your own company is you get to influence the culture in the workplace. So when we set up M&K, we agreed on 5 core principles. We're in the business to serve our property owners. They're our #1 priority, and we want them to be satisfied. When they rent out their homes, we want to make sure the guests have a memorable experience in Niseko and they come back and stay with us. We also want to work with the best people. So we try to make M&K as attractive as possible by paying a good salary, providing benefits, having staff trips, parties, and being flexible when people need time off. Another point is we think it's very important to be active in the community. We are by and large half foreign, half local company, but we're seen as foreigners by some. So to make sure that we're part of the community, we volunteer our time and money. We help out with town cleanups. There's an annual fair or Matsuri and food festival that we participate in. We host a music event. We invite local students to play with the professional musicians, and basically we raise our hand anytime there's an opportunity to help. Last but not least, we need to generate a return on investment for our shareholders. But this is very much our last priority, because if we do the other four things well, profits usually follow. So I want to pivot to the hospitality industry. Hospitality is one of the oldest businesses in the world. It's been around for thousands of years, ever since people started traveling. Like many businesses, hospitality has changed dramatically in the past 100 years with affordable air travel, hotel chains, credit cards, the internet, etc. But the industry has changed a lot more in subtle ways in the past 10 years with technology creating efficiencies, and companies like Airbnb, bringing in the sharing economy, becoming much more popular. Specifically, one of the big trends is consolidation. Marriott is the classic example. They went from hundreds of hotels, 20 years ago. There's over 7,000 Marriott branded hotels in the past few years, and mainly that's been through acquisition. Their loyalty program, I just looked up, they have 150 million members. And when this type of industry consolidation happens, what you see is the large companies get larger, the ones in the middle get bought out or go out of business, and the smaller ones, like us, you have to really work hard on proving your value proposition to your customers. And there's a couple other trends in our industry that I think are important for you all to know. One trend is wellness. The tagline in our industry is wellness is the new luxury, and that's because people are willing to spend a lot of money to stay healthy. A number of hotel chains and resorts now just cater specifically to wellness travelers. And it's something we do as well through our activities. Another defining trend of the past few years has been the focus on providing guests with experiences. So, many years ago, you stayed at a hotel and you figured out what you wanted to do on your own. Today, we help guests plan and reserve their experiences or activities in advance. And like I said earlier, we provide many of those services to the guests directly ourselves, like our kids' camp and ski school. So the current status of the hospitality is no industry has been hit harder by COVID than our industry. Travel, restaurants, lodging, events have all been canceled or open with restrictions. So it's been a tough couple of years. But there's reason for optimism. As countries have opened up, there's pent-up demand and people are traveling again. If you look at what's happening in the US and Europe, there's been a surge of travel, a surge in hotel bookings in popular resort destinations. So we've gone through COVID and where, business has slowed down. I mean, one of the weird things that's happened is, we now actually have worker shortages. So, and part of the reason that is pretty straightforward. It's an industry that requires people to come into work rather than work from home. And so with all the COVID concerns and restrictions on travel, a lot of people have exited the industry, which is creating temporary worker shortages. The industry, I think has evolved to deal with COVID pretty well. There's now a strong focus on customer safety pretty much everywhere, with everyone wearing masks, hand sanitizer, and attention to physical distancing. But I think one of the lasting changes in the hospitality industry will be that customers will require more space when traveling, and they want more outdoor dining options when going to restaurants. And over time, I think this will influence hotel and restaurant building designs. My hope, and maybe your hope too, is that airlines and trains and buses will also follow that model and create larger spaces and more comfortable traveling options. Kobayashi-san asked me, a question prior to this. He said, look, how do you differentiate yourself? Because the hospitality industry is very competitive. And it's a great question. When we're looking at differentiation in our business, we look at 4 areas. The first is product design. As I mentioned before, we decided early on in our real estate business to focus on building managed communities rather than standalone houses. There are many competitors building homes without providing any shared facilities like a clubhouse and restaurant or outdoor areas for people to enjoy. So if you design your product from the beginning to provide all these services, you've already started to be a little bit different. But you can't stop there. In terms of service excellence, we made a decision that we would provide a friendly service with attention to detail and, asking customers for feedback. This is as opposed to like a formal suit and tie experience that many hotels provide. There's nothing wrong with that service, but we decided for our product, ski resort, we would provide that sort of service and really continue to pay attention to detail. The next point of differentiation for us is dynamic pricing. And all that really means is charging more when it's busy and charging less when it's quiet. But the trick is to stay competitive with the other providers in Niseko and other options for your guests. People are price sensitive, so your prices need to reflect supply and demand. The last point about differentiation is continuous improvement. We've made this a core part of how we do business. We're always looking for ways to use feedback from our customers to improve or to provide new services. The future, Kobayashi-san also asked me about that. That's a tough one. The future of the hospitality business, though, I think is pretty bright. But technology is making it easier and more efficient for people to travel. There's pent-up demand, and I think that will sustain us for a few years. Niseko is an amazing place with very few competitors as an international skiing destination in Asia. The future, however, is always uncertain. So you have to plan to solve the next challenges. And we kind of have a few ways that we look at this. The challenges we face in the future will be similar to the past because, we fundamentally believe that human nature tends to repeat itself. And history will often provide clues on how best to handle a challenging situation. And then we kind of look at this, we say, before you make a decision, follow the facts, not opinion. Do your research, listen to experts, take your time before you make a big decision. But even when you have the facts and you have a difficult decision, try to stick to your core principles. And I'll give you an example of what's happened to us. When COVID struck in March of 2020, many of our competitors in Niseko, they simply shut down and they reduced staff because they thought it would take a few years to get back to normal. We didn't do that. Our competition were right. They were right that it's going to take a few years to get back to normal. But they let go of some great people, and we were very fortunate to have an opportunity to hire a number of them, which leads me to the last point. When we try and make decisions, we focus on the long term rather than the short term. This new team of people that we have will help us be ready when travel opens again. They've made us better because we've learned from their experiences with other companies. So if we made a short-term decision to just shut everything down, we would never have those opportunities to work with new people, and we would have been sort of stuck in the rut, in the muck. So I'm glad that we hired them, and it's really made a big difference. So I want to change the focus here and talk about you and how you might be able to learn from my experiences. And the first thing I want to say is, there are many paths to take in your career and life, for that matter. I've worked with people from all over the world with every type of background. There are many paths to happiness and success. But there are common traits or successful behaviors. One of them is super obvious, but it's often overlooked. Be useful. Be useful to your boss or your employer. When I wasn't busy, I asked what I could do to help. When I was busy, I tried to make sure I was doing the right things. And look, it sounds simple, but just being useful and listening to what's happening is super important when you start out in your careers. You've probably heard this one before, but it's worth repeating. I found people willing to help me when I was grateful and positive. We all have times when we're grumpy or negative. And when that happened, I didn't achieve much. I didn't get much done. But the nice thing about being grateful and positive is it's something that you can control. Last but not least, if I've had any success in my career, it's because of grit. I know I'm not the smartest or the best at everything, but I try hard, I care about the quality of my work, and I don't give up easily. Your effort does matter. When people see you care and you're trying, they will help you. There are a few experiences I want to highlight that have helped me along the way, and I hope this is useful. It's obvious, but to find a job, you have to learn skills, and you need to continue to learn throughout your career. University and graduate school were incredibly useful, not for what they taught me in a particular class, but for the people I met and the opportunities or the doors that the schools opened for me. I didn't know what I wanted to do in high school or even college for that matter. So trying different jobs helped me decide what I didn't want to do. And in a way, it kind of motivated me to graduate so I would have more options. Another simple thing, but worth mentioning, asking genuine thought-provoking questions at work or in school has been very useful for me. People like to talk about themselves, their business, and if you listen closely, they'll tell you a lot and they'll give you valuable insights. I know you've heard this one from your teachers and parents, but reading books helps. For me, working in new places, reading books before I arrived, it helped me understand the different countries I lived in, the different cultures, the people I work with, and it made conversation easier. I'd say for current events, I would suggest reading articles like the ones you would find in magazines like The Economist, The New Yorker, or Wired, rather than just stories on the internet. Staying current with what's happening is important, but fake and sensational news is not really important. Maybe a couple of life lessons to kind of wrap up. The first one, and you heard me say this when I switched from banking to M&K, try and balance your life with fun, with schoolwork, and your other responsibilities. There is enough time in the day or week to do everything if you make thoughtful choices. Another point that's been really helpful for me is to look after your health. Being physically active, eating well, getting enough sleep, it helps you think clearly and it stimulates growth. Nothing's fun when you don't feel well or you're tired. Being grateful, looking on the bright side of life is super important. It's easy to find fault and be negative, but we all have reasons to be grateful. You get to choose how you feel about a situation. Lastly, I heard this a long time ago, and I recommend writing down and sharing your goals with family and friends. There's a lot of research about how the simple act of writing and sharing your goals keeps you focused and on the path to reach what you want. So thank you, everyone, Kobayashi-san, for allowing me to share my story with you. I want to say before we go to the Q&A, at M&K, we do provide internships. So if any of you are looking for an opportunity to learn about real estate, marketing, sales, ski instructor, or just want general work experience, please contact me. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Okay.
I just wanted to give a quick round of applause and thank you very much, Mr. Guillemette, for your time and then your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the Q&A section, I believe, Adam, you had something.
First of all, I wanted to say the same thing. I thought it was a very engaging presentation, and I was very interested. For someone who's looking to enter the hospitality industry in the future in a similar way, I was wondering, you kind of talked about obviously the pandemic might have some effects with the industry, but you said the future was bright. I was wondering what you think about Airbnb as a competitor, especially with like some people preferring to live on their own when they travel and have that cheaper alternative, and if that's a threat or not.
Yeah, Airbnb, when it first came out, we thought it was going to be a threat. And what we've learned over time is we now use Airbnb to help us market our services, and we're not alone. So a lot of management companies use Airbnb as a platform to reach customers. So the original ethos of Airbnb was, you own a home or you own an apartment, you're not there and you rent it out. And what's happened over time, for better or for worse, is it's become a lot more professional. So instead of dealing with the owner directly, in many cases with Airbnb, you are dealing with a management company. And there's nothing wrong with that. We know we live in Niseko, or my staff do. They know the area and they help the guests out, but it's definitely evolved. And we see Airbnb as a sort of, not a competitor, but a tool, to be honest. Did that answer your question, Adam?
Yeah, it did. Very interesting. Thank you.
Hi, I have a quick question. How has your investment banking background help you or shape on how you approach starting your own business, and how has it shaped how you attack problem solving?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful to have had that investment banking experience. It's not a direct one-for-one transfer of knowledge, because obviously investment banking is very specific, but there's skills that are very transferable, such as how to work within a team, how to deal with difficult situations, how to plan, how to execute on a plan. So, if you ask me, I'd say, I'm very happy that I started out working in large companies. I had an incredible network ready and willing to follow me into my next career. So yeah, I'd say that working for a large company first probably makes more sense than going from small company to large company. But as I said before, every path is different, and I think there are many ways of doing it. But I learned a tremendous amount, and very grateful to have had that experience.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I want to ask a question about the location. So when starting up a business, the location is obviously very important. And for you as well, I think the location is very important for you as a Hokkaido. But when starting up a business, what do you think are the main factors that you need to take into account when finding a location, or what should the drive be?
Great question. I think the drive should be, you start with solving a problem, right? So that will give you some clues as to where you should be. Although having said that, with Zoom and technology, I think setting up a company pretty much anywhere is now possible. But for us, doing real estate, providing hospitality services, it made sense to have the company in Niseko. But one thing that I didn't mention, which my daughter knows, is for a lot of those early years and up until last year, my wife and I were in Hong Kong. and I was traveling back and forth. So I was close to my customers. And if I had to sum it up, I'd say, you start your business and be as close to your customers as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so my question is, some of us are currently in the middle of, applying to colleges and all that. And some of us were interested in the hospitality management schools. Most of those schools require some sort of a resume or a work history. And then now a lot of colleges are now accepting resumes. Why is that experience important to you and the hospitality industry?
Again, really good question. Hospitality management schools are amazing, and they do teach you a lot. And I think one of the things that I talked about earlier was having a broad range of skills. So the hospitality schools teach you to be a manager as opposed to a frontline worker, obviously. But if you have experience as a frontline worker, if you've waited tables or you've washed dishes and you have some experience working in restaurants, you are a much better manager because you know what your staff are going through. So, hospitality schools are again, to be honest, are not where we generally hire our staff, although we do have a few members of staff who've gone to those schools. We've hired sort of, managers from other companies or people who've done different things like me. We've had a few ex-bankers. We have a couple of teachers. We have some accountants. So, I think there are a lot of different paths, but if you know that you want to be in the hospitality industry, sure, I would definitely look at hospitality schools, and I would try and get some experience, like, working in a restaurant or hotel before you do it, or as you're doing it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, if you had to do all over again, would you think you would start off in a finance direction?
Probably, yeah, I probably would. I learned so much, and I met so many interesting people, and I got to see the world, basically. And while I know it's not easy now, getting into finance or maybe even getting an international posting, but I do think it's definitely a worthwhile career, but it's not the only one. There are a bunch of other things. You have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy the challenges that come with finance. We do a lot of internships at M&K, and I did a lot of internships when I was with banks. And one of the things that we always talk about, and I always talk about, is you have to enjoy the daily problems that you solve. Otherwise, you're going to hate your job, right? So in finance, what sort of problems are you solving? I mean, it kind of depends on what area you are, but it's going to be generally an intellectual problem. You're not working with your hands. You're not making stuff. You're generally not creating things. You're solving, theoretical problems, or maybe you're trying to sell a product. So I'd say is in terms of finance, yes, it was a great experience for me, and it could be for you, but you have to enjoy solving those daily problems.
I have another question. So I was wondering what class in college really helped you? What was the class that helped you the most, maybe like with your future skills? And if you were to hire someone, let's say in any management industry, what class should we take in college that probably help us skill-wise?
My favorite class, without a doubt, was sort of the management and leadership class. We call them capstone classes. It's sort of my senior year. That's where we did, Harvard Business School case studies. So you work in a team, you're given a problem, and you have to come up with solutions. I really enjoyed that. Even, when I was 18, 19 years old, I enjoyed. I like working in teams. I mentioned team sports because, it has had a really positive impact on me. I like working in a team. I feel like, I get I'm better when I'm working together than I am alone. Not everyone's like that. Some people are great working independently, but yeah, I enjoyed that class. And then when I did my MBA, we had a similar class. And I love that sort of, business case and looking at a situation, a real life situation. You come up with a solution, you hear about how the company resolved it, then you get to see the results. I thought that was cool.
I have a question.
Please.
Who are your key partnerships?
We have a lot. My key partnerships are actually with our property owners. So we have just over 100 properties. And I mentioned before, we manage them for each of the owners. So I look at them as sort of the cornerstone of our business and our key partners, because they drive our service. If they want a restaurant, we build a restaurant, for example. Externally, I mean, they are external because they don't work for M&K, but that's a partnership with our customers. We use a number of local providers, so local farms to buy produce for our for our restaurant. We work with local schools with our kids camp. And then we use local companies for snow clearing, cleaning service, and that sort of thing. But then I guess from a sales and marketing point of view, we use a technology company called Roomboss for our property management and rental system. We use the big online travel agents. We use Expedia, Booking.com, Agoda. All those companies are part of our partnerships for renting out properties, and Airbnb, which I mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just waiting for the hard question from my daughter. I know it's coming. She's going to ask me an impossible question. I'm joking. Any other questions? I'm happy to.
Yeah, I have one more question. So, how is M&K able to stay afloat during the pandemic when a lot of others couldn't? Especially, you said that while paying your workers well and not laying many of them off.
That's a great question, and I forgot to mention it, and it was in my notes. So, as I said, we made a decision in March of 2020. We were going to keep all of our staff, and then predictably, some people left. Right when they could, they went back home, or they, which was out of Niseko, either other parts of Japan or internationally, they went back to their home. So we had an opportunity. We had some positions that were open, but the most important thing is the Japanese government. They supported us. They gave us grants. They gave us employment subsidies, as long as we didn't let anyone go. Now, they made that decision sort of after a number of companies had let people go. So, they weren't able to enjoy the same subsidies that we were, because we kept our staff. And it was, we didn't know, we had no idea if the Japanese government would support us like they have, but they've been tremendous partners. I should have mentioned that. The government's been a big supporter of us and the industry, the hospitality industry generally.
I have one final question.
Please.
So you obviously have gone around the world and you've been to many different places. In terms of a business aspect, which country would you say is going to be like the country to live in the next 20, 10 years, etc.?
Ooh, that's a good question. We moved from Hong Kong, and if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I probably would have said Hong Kong, because it's incredibly efficient. It's a great melting pot of people from Australia, from Europe, from Asia. That has changed due to you read the news, so you can probably guess what's changed there. I think countries like Singapore get it. a lot of people say Singapore is kind of boring. I've never really felt that. Singapore, for example, is taking a real hard look at cryptocurrencies and how they can encourage that. It's a pretty business-friendly place. Taxes are fairly low. It's an easy, nice place to live. Beyond that, it kind of comes down to you and what you enjoy doing outside of work, right? Being close to your family and friends, I think, is incredibly important and can paper over a lot of other issues. But one country that I do think gets it right more than not is probably Singapore. And Japan's great too. Don't get me wrong. We're here, and I love Japan. I assume you're not talking about Japan, but the challenges in Japan is obviously language, although that's getting much better with technology. Tax rate's pretty high. The labor situation here, particularly in hospitality, is tricky because it is an aging population. So finding staff is tricky at times. So we do get a lot of overseas workers. But Japan, from a just quality of life perspective, is very high. It is very high. It's safe. There's amazing food. It's got a lot of diversity and variety, right? From Okinawa up to Hokkaido. And again, you see the government helping out when people need it. It's a functional government for the most part. So, we're very happy in Japan.
Sorry, one more question.
Please.
In many places in Japan, you see that they've tried to make places more tourist friendly, but failed often. How do you think, as future, entrepreneurs, we should go about in making a tourist spot, since you've seen many failures, especially in Japan?
Yeah, also, great question and good insight. So I've been asked this question a lot, and I've shared this. If someone said, why did Niseko make it, but why didn't other resorts do as well? And it is down to language and being inclusive. So the town of Niseko and the area, it's rural, it's farming, and they just let it happen, and for better and for worse, foreigners were kind of welcomed, and we work with local people, local government, and there were no restrictions, and that allowed the town to flourish, and Niseko to become what it is today, which is really an international destination. So making sure you understand your environment, what is the local population, local government feelings towards your business? Do they want international business? Not every town, not every location wants it, and therefore decisions get made that make your life or what you're trying to do a lot harder. So yeah, I'd say certainly language and openness allowed Niseko to flourish, and those are sort of the ingredients you would need in any place that you're trying to do tourism in particular. You need an openness.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My final question was from my experience, at least, when I stay at a huge multinational hotels, comparing that to a countryside country house or some company that offer those type of housing, I realized that large multinational companies' quality isn't as higher as the local or small companies. And why do you think that is, in your
opinion? Training, but beyond training, I'd say authenticity, right? I've experienced exactly the same thing. And so look, some hotels are great. Jillian and I and our families went down to Miyakojima recently, and we stayed at a big hotel chain, and the service just wasn't great. And there's when you go to a smaller place, let's focus on the positive. When you go to a smaller place, people are more invested, right? My staff live there, they work there. They want to be there. They're invested in the place, right? For the most part. The big hotel chains, a lot of them do rotations, right? So you have, 1 year in Miyakishima, and then you might go to Okinawa, or you go to Hokkaido or somewhere like that. And so you get young people who are starting out in their career, but they just don't have a lot of training, and they're not authentic. They're almost robotic. Is that kind of what you mean? Because that's kind of how I feel. Sometimes it's a bit robotic, those big hotels, and the service just doesn't feel real. Where you stay in a small ryokan, or you go somewhere in the countryside, and people are just so nice, and it's because they're authentic. They care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So before we wrap up, does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask before? Oh, Jillian, perfect. Go ahead.
What was the best hotel or hospitality thing that you've stayed at?
Ooh, that is a good question. I really, I've been very fortunate. We've stayed at some amazing places. I think the villa that we stayed at where we got married in Bali was incredible. That staff were so attentive and so helpful and so much fun. We stayed there for a week. We got to know the chef. We got to know the drivers. They ended up playing soccer and wiffle ball with us, and it was just a real openness of the people in Bali. They understood why we were there. They made an emotional thing like a wedding so much better. So I really enjoyed that. The big hotel chains, I'm trying to think of. It's funny. It's hard to put your finger on one thing, right? Because they're all good when you stay at a 5-star hotel generally. But yeah, I remember that, our wedding in Bali, how awesome the staff were, and, knowing everyone's name, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, well, I've given my contact details to Kobayashi-san, and they're on this presentation. I mean it, if anyone is looking for internship opportunities now, or when you're in college, give us a shout, let us know, and hopefully we can help you out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guillemette. So thank you for coming to our seminar today. And then we will update you if there are any other seminars that are coming. But thank you very much for coming and giving a talk, Mr. Guillemette. And then for you attendees, thank you very much for attending.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks, everyone.